Good morning. On early this morning, today we look at 1 Corinthians 9. But even though I'm on early, you'll find me when you look. Paul is writing here about the rights of an apostle. And, an apostle is one who speaks for God. The disciples were followers, and then after Jesus died and was raised from the dead, and he sent them out, then they became apostles, ones of the people who speak for. And of course, Paul had an encounter on the road to Damascus and met Jesus that way, and was commissioned by Jesus to be an apostle, to be the preacher to the Gentiles and as well as to the Jews. And as he says, am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? And that's, you know, as a pastor, people will refer to a congregation as, my congregation, my people. And they're not really. I mean, I may be the pastor, the one who leads worship and preaches, but really, they're members of the Church of Christ. They're not members of the Church of Russ, that's for certain. But I speak for God, and that's hopefully what I do every morning as I come to you that way. And it's not at all about me, and that's what Paul is saying. It's not about me, but as an apostle, he says that an apostle has rights, but yet an apostle doesn't need to be any different than anyone else. And he asks that question in verse 4. Do we not have the right to our food and drink? Do we not have the right to be accompanied by a believing wife? And as do the other apostles or the brothers of the Lord and Cephas. And we know that Cephas, Peter, was married, because in the Gospels, when Jesus and the disciples go to Peter's house, Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, meaning, Peter has a wife. And so there's, it's part of life is being complete, and I truly think that a part of being complete is to have someone that you know that you can share with, a companion that you love and trust in that way. And then verse 6, or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right? So evidently Barnabas is another one who's not married, like Paul isn't married. And then he asks the question, who at any time pays the expenses for military service? Who plants a vineyard and doesn't expect to eat some of the fruit of it? Who raises livestock and doesn't benefit from the livestock? And so he's using this example, or these examples, to show that, as an apostle, I mean, it's right for him to expect some sort of reimbursement, some sort of payment from these congregations, from the people. Although he says too in times, that he works to support himself, in his profession, because he doesn't want to be a burden to others. But the reality is that, and in today's society, we're all aware that, our pastors, leaders of our churches, and all the leaders, people, anybody who works gets paid for the work that they do. And then he asks, well, where do I get this authority to say this? Is it my authority, or is it authority to come from God? And it's, we don't speak of ourselves. We speak of God and of God's glory, and sometimes, we use ourselves as examples. And I've told people, when they've said to me, man, that sermon spoke right to me, and I said, yeah, it spoke right to me too, or it wouldn't be able to speak to you. And because I'm no different than anybody else, and all of those things. And that's what he says, who speaks, for our sake? It was written for our sake, the laws and all of that. But yet we speak of Christ, and he is the focus of all that we have. And so Paul is just, he's talking about his rights as an apostle, and not only his rights, but but all of those who speak for God in so many ways. He says we don't want to put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. And this is sometimes, this is why we have missions. This is why we donate to the church wide, so that the missions and others can be hear the word where they need to have someone supporting them. And we talk about, I know pastors that go someplace to start a mission church, and they go, and they're supported by the main church, by the church body, because there is no congregation, there is nothing there in this new vicinity to support them. And this is what Paul found in his missionary journeys. As he went around, there were Jewish synagogues, there were other temples and places of worship, but there weren't Christian places that way. And so, as an apostle, one who was sent, it was Paul's right that way to say, well, to provide a meal, to provide a place to stay, to whatever that way, but yet he did not want to be a burden on anyone either. And in verse 16, he says, if I proclaim the gospel, this gives me no ground for boasting, and an obligation is laid on me. But woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel. And it's, when you know of God's love and of God's grace, you're not supposed to just hold it in and just, it's all for me. It's this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, so that others can see. And that's when we have a baptism. We light the candle and we say, let your light so shine before others that they may see. Your light so shine before, I'm not going to get it right here, no, but let your light so shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So we live for ourselves, but we live for God, and we live for others. And this is whether we're an apostle or whether we're just a normal everyday person. And I truly consider myself, well, maybe not normal, but an everyday person. And that's for sure. In verses 19 through 23, again, Paul is talking about, the rights of an apostle, who he is, what he believes, what he does. And he says, I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law. So we're not free from following the Ten Commandments and all of those that God made, but we're also under Christ's law. The new commandment I give you, love one another as I have loved you. Love one another has always been there, but the as I have loved you is what's added in there on that new commandment. And it's, it makes it difficult. We can't love like Jesus loved, really, can we? But this is our goal. This is our model of how we should live. And then the last few verses he talks about, do you not know that in a race everybody competes, but only one wins a prize? Well, in today's society, they get participation awards and they get this and that because they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But the reality is that to run the race, to be involved in it, the goal doesn't always need to be to win. The goal needs to be to compete for ourselves, for our self-esteem, to say that I did it. I've never run a marathon. I have no desire to, or a half marathon. I have walked a 2-mile walk and more, but it's not to say that I won, but it's to say that I completed it. And so that's our faith journey, and to not to say that I won or I'm so great or anything that way, but to say that I remain faithful to God, to Jesus Christ.